Welcome to The Verdict. Kid Meyers and Mick Cornett starting a new show this Sunday on, we're going to be talking about Oklahoma's economy, something that all of us are affected by. Mick, we got Jeremy Oller back on to talk about it.
Should be a really good show. You know, it's not just Oklahoma this time. It's not just the United States that's having economic troubles. It's really the entire world and how economically we've been affected by this virus, the pandemic, and the reaction of people taking precautions. So I'll be interested in Jeremy's take, and perhaps he'll make a prediction on when we can move to a new normal.
Yeah, we'll see if we can push him into that.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, we'll be back with you folks in just a few minutes. You're watching The Verdict.
I wanted to become a princess ever since I was little. Being crowned is an amazing feeling. It means everything to me to represent my tribe, especially as princess.
The Chickasaw Princess program has been in existence since 1963. The leadership and the skills that we learn as being the Chickasaw Princess has been handed down from generation to generation.
We're the ambassadors of the Chickasaw Nation for a year.
We're a special group of ladies that have represented different governors and lieutenant governors over the years.
I would tell young girls who want to become a princess just to go for it. Don't let any barriers stop you from doing what you want to do.
There are some dynamic young ladies that are going to be great ambassadors for the Chickasaw Nation out there. Once a princess, always a princess, with honor and dignity.
See more stories about the Chickasaw people at profilesofenation.com.
One of the best kept secrets about the post 9/11 GI Bill benefit is that it can be used at a trade school or a technical school, and it doesn't have to be used at a university or college. These are benefits that the veterans have earned through their service, and they should take advantage of it.
Veterans really need to understand that there are many resources offered by the Oklahoma Department of Veteran Affairs. They are there to help you find the right school for you, the school that will help you and your family make great steps into your future.
As we indicated in the open, we're going to be talking about the state of the Oklahoma economy and the national economy to some extent with our guest today, Dr. Jeremy Oller. Jeremy is the interim interim dean, of the Business College of the University of Central Oklahoma. He did his undergraduate work at UCO, did his law work at the University of Oklahoma, did his Ph.D. work in economics at the University of Oklahoma. Thereafter, he worked for a while as an economist and advisor with C.H. Guernsey and Company, then shifted to the academic side and became full-time at the University of Central Oklahoma, teaching a lot of economics classes and being involved in the administration of the business college. He's written a lot of articles, given a lot of speeches, received a lot of awards, does a lot of teaching, all generally in the area of economics, which is what we want to talk about. And on a personal note, in my practice of law, I do a good bit of work requiring economic help, a lot of other help as well, but economic help. And Jeremy is my go-to economist. I'll disclose that bit of prejudice at the very beginning. Jeremy, welcome. Glad to have you.
Glad to be back. Thank you.
Jeremy, let's talk about UCO. How are things going on campus? And I guess everybody's a little anxious about returning for the fall semester given the circumstances.
Absolutely. Well, like every other business, universities have had a major challenge with COVID-19. I mean, we're talking about an entire change in the structure of how students come to class, of how they participate and how they learn. So basically, we've had to be very innovative throughout this entire challenge in the spring. And I have to start by saying how proud I am of our faculty and our leadership at UCO, because we transitioned in 2 weeks entire courses and got students capable and ready to attend virtually and online so that they could seamlessly finish out the semester and graduate. So to be in the dean's position, I was so proud of our faculty and staff who'd done so much for our students to make sure that they were able to transition in a very short amount of time.
How much work do you think it takes in a typical economics course to transition from classroom to online? How many man hours are involved in that?
Oh, it's significant. These are things, as a faculty member, I would spend months preparing a course and designing the assignments, designing the materials, and then what was asked upon our faculty was to transition that in 2 weeks and to take, all the assignments that you'd prepared. So you prepared a course one way, and I actually taught in the spring. So I prepared everything one way, and then all of a sudden had to change, and I started doing lectures via Zoom or WebEx, and that was a different challenge because now you've got to manage a classroom virtually, which, is a new skill set. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're having to do that now. So you're seeing a lot of innovation, a lot of changes. But it also is exciting because you start to learn something about yourself. And if you embrace the challenge, you learn new ways to do things, and sometimes things that you might adapt long term.
Well, economically, of course, the United States has been drastically hit because of the virus and the extenuating issues. But here in Oklahoma, of course, with oil and gas being such a dominant part of our economy, you had the issues that were geopolitical, Russia, the Middle East. And so can you kind of take our viewers through that part of the equation and how the oil and gas industry has been affected here over the last few months?
Oh, certainly. So the first thing that everyone has to realize is that the major exporter and producer of oil is OPEC, which OPEC at its very core is a cartel. And what I always find interesting about OPEC is that what they engage in is essentially horizontal price fixing, so which would be condemned in the United States, but it's not condemned there. And Russia joined part of that cartel known as the OPEC Plus. I think it was back in 2016. So you're talking about a major supplier. I mean, many of the major suppliers of oil in the world. And what started to happen was a breakdown in disagreements over how much they should produce. The COVID virus had started breaking out, around the turn of the year. OPEC had met in early March, and their proposition was that we need to cut back production because demand is declining. Obviously, if we got China shutting down factories, then the demand for oil is declining as well. So they wanted to tighten the supply up. But Russia wasn't on board with that plan. And so Russia essentially walked out of the meetings. And when they walked out of the meetings, it engaged, I think Saudi Arabia was the one that then triggered the price war. So it was, okay, if we're not going to cooperate in this agreement, then it's full-scale outright production.
Well, what precipitated Russia's position? It would seem to me economically it would be in Russia's best interest, albeit illegal in the United States, best interest to go along with that plan. Why do you think they did not?
Well, I always say that's the interesting thing about collusion and cartels and trying to price fix, is that what's beneficial for the group is to say restrict output to raise the price. And so as a whole, they're more profitable. But it's what's called a prisoner's dilemma, where what benefits the group may not benefit the individual. It gives the individual the incentive to basically change strategies. So if Russia wants to keep producing more while others are restricting output, so that essentially they're getting more quantity sold and more revenue generated from a higher price. So it's the self-interest versus the interest of the group. And at that point, my only assumption would be they're acting out of self-interest in a prisoner's dilemma kind of way.
Well, Jeremy, from what I read, it appears that the United States is now producing or could produce enough oil and gas for its own needs. And I know there are geopolitical issues and reasons why we trade internationally with oil and gas, but what would the economic repercussions be if the United States as a policymaker just said, look, we're going to rely on ourselves from now on, and the price will be what the price will be, but we're not going to import or export oil or gas? What do you think would happen economically?
Well, economically, what you start to do there is you reduce the demand for oil worldwide, because now the United States is self-sufficient. And in the United States, if we take the scenario you're talking about, which is we're not importing anything, well, now the price is really dependent on the supply of domestic producers, which there probably is ample supply of domestic producers to do so. Texas produces at the level of many countries, so just right there alone. And Oklahoma's fourth in terms of production of oil. So what's possible, of course, the dynamics being that if the United States is not importing, it might tighten the supply domestically, which could have an upward pressure on prices within the country.
Jeremy, we just have a minute before we've got to take a break. But was there any serious thought given to what Mick just talked about in economic circles about the U.S. saying we don't need to take this hit, we can just supply ourselves without doing any importing?
I can't say I've heard that discussion, but I mean, I think that's always talked about as a possibility, whether it actually becomes policy, because you do now, you're now changing the world market for oil specifically. So that's a big decision with a lot of consequences. And the United States is typically not one to ban imports or not import at all. So that would be kind of an unprecedented move, really.
Well, on that note, we need to take a break. We are visiting with Jeremy Oller. You're visiting also with Mick Cornett and Kent Meyers on The Verdict. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
OU Law has a history and heritage that are unparalleled. At the University of Oklahoma College of Law, we empower our students to pursue the career of their dreams. We have the highest U.S. News ranking ever achieved by an Oklahoma law school. We are the first law school in the country to launch a college-wide digital initiative. And this year, our competition teams rank #2 in the nation. OU Law, generations of excellence, limitless possibilities.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
And welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett visiting with Dr. Jeremy Oller, talking about economic things. Mick, where would you like to go from here?
Well, let's talk a little specifically about the state of Oklahoma, its economy, and its reliance on oil and gas. And so these lower prices can't be good for us, Jeremy.
No, and I'll talk first about the significance of the price drop and then Oklahoma's role in that. So the price drop, before the price war was triggered, I would say there was support around the $52 level mark on the WTI exchange. So almost immediately after the price war was triggered, you saw prices dropping to about $31.50 within days. Well, then you added in the COVID effect and the shutting down of local economies, and all of a sudden the price is nearing $20 by the end of March, and then even $11.26 by late April. So that's a devastating change in price. Now, when you convert that to Oklahoma, Oklahoma is a state that produces about 500,000 barrels of oil a day. So you're talking about something that generates $26 million in revenue per day. And when you slash the prices to 20% of its value or 30% of its value, by the end of March, you're losing $16.6 million a day. By the end of, its low in April, you're losing $21 million per day. So that's significant revenue that goes to pay employees. And remember, when you're talking about a state's economy, you're not just talking about that industry. This is a major industry in the state. So when it hurts, you're talking about employment within those firms, and those employees buy houses, they buy cars, they eat dinners, they shop. So they're not spending as much money because they might be unemployed at this point. You're now talking about suppliers to that business, which could include things, pipe manufacturers. It could be any manufacturing industry might contribute to them. You're also talking about transportation industries, railroads, So basically, there's linkages throughout society when one industry starts having difficulties, and that can impact an entire state's economy.
Let me ask you to talk just a minute about what's the generally accepted view about what does it cost to find, drill, produce, and sell 1 barrel of oil? How much per barrel?
I've heard two common numbers. One is about $50 and one is about $60. Yeah. But as an economist, this poses an interesting question as well. Pardon me. Because you have two different costs you have to think about. There's an average cost, which is the 50 or 60, and then there's what you'd call a marginal cost. A marginal cost is the cost of producing one more unit. So one might ask themselves, why are these firms still producing oil, or why are they still selling oil when the price is at 20 or 30 and they're not covering their average cost? Well, the reason is this: because they've already spent this is an industry where the majority of the costs go into acquiring the land, the drilling. So the cost of producing another barrel is not that much, as opposed to the fixed cost of actually beginning the process. So that's why it makes economic sense for them to keep producing, because the cost of the next barrel is below that $50 or $60 mark and even below the low price level. So they've got to keep producing to basically minimize their losses.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jeremy, I remember reading it. Will Rogers once commented during the height of the Great Depression that the Americans would be the first generation to drive themselves to the poorhouse. And I think it was a reflection of how, the economy is really relative to this generation, to the past generations. But because this is a worldwide issue, and I'm talking about the pandemic here, it seems as if it affects everyone in a very similar manner, and the fact that the economy is kind of based on faith anyway. So it seems like the real effect to the citizenry would be minimal. Am I on the right track or the wrong track in that series of theories there?
So the effect to the citizenry of the pandemic?
Yeah, how Americans' daily lives would be affected if we come out of this pandemic, seriously with higher unemployment, et cetera.
Well, it will be significant. I mean, there's so many levels to it. When you have higher levels of unemployment in Oklahoma, say it's had a fivefold increase in unemployment. There's so many variables you look at, but essentially that does trickle down to the businesses, or not trickle down, but it starts to move its way up to the businesses because people have less money to spend. Right now, I think it's hard to see it because right now I've heard comments that real estate's selling well and automobiles are selling well. Well, two reasons those are performing well are because interest rates have declined, so the price levels come down. But when you start to analyze what also is happening, I'm not sure at this point in time everyone's necessarily felt the true hard hit of the loss of income. For instance, you've had unemployment, which is still viable, and you've had stimulus checks. So the tap on people's incomes may not have been truly felt yet. But if unemployment doesn't change and sustains at double-digit levels, say past unemployment time periods, 6 months generally, then you might really see income become constrained. And even those businesses that are performing now, such as probably Walmart and Amazon, they're going to start suffering from the fact that consumers just don't have income to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about a stat that I, from time to time, see in the newspaper, because I'm just kind of interested in it, and that's the number of drilling rigs in Oklahoma being active at any given time. That, I guess, is one barometer of the health of the oil and gas industry, is how vigorous is the exploration for new oil and gas. Where are we on rig usage in Oklahoma?
Rig use, I haven't looked at the most recent data, so I can't say that I have the exact count of the rig data yet. But usually it's a good indicator, because I would say it's a reliable indicator is because as the price is higher, you're going to see more exploration and development. But that's what also kind of poses a challenge for that industry, because what I mentioned about the marginal cost being what makes the decision as to whether to produce or not. Well, if I decide to produce at a given time period, so we'll call that time period start point X, and I go through all the cost of developing it, and I'm exploring and doing all this because the price is high, well, now the problem starts to become, even when the price becomes low, I can't turn it off. So the rigs are still there, the count's still high, and I'm not just turning off the spigot to stop the flow, because it's still less than my marginal cost of producing. So it may be a lagged indicator of health, I would think.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. Getting away from the oil and gas industry and back to the effect of the pandemic on Oklahoma business. What is your recovery time estimate for the Oklahoma economy, assuming it can recover? How long is it going to take to dig out of this double hit that the economy has taken?
The tough thing is that about that, to answer that as an economist, I almost have to answer that or have an answer from a health professional first, because that's the data that's going to matter. And we see the escalation of cases. If things start scaling back or shutting down, we might very well be in the same problem. I mean, we've talked about the oil and gas a lot today, and oil specifically. Well, the oil started to rebound some. It's now up to $40. But if people aren't traveling as much, or things start closing down and production doesn't increase, demand is going to take another hit in that industry, and you'll probably see price beneath what it is now, which at $40 is still below the average cost of production. So that's what you got to know first is, what's the effect? I mean, how long is this pandemic going to be around? Is it going to have second or third waves? And those are the questions, unfortunately, I don't have answers to.
Well, you're not by yourself. I don't
Yeah.
None of us do. And on that questionable note, we're going to have to close the discussion for today because of our time. But Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us and filling us in on the economics in Oklahoma.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Good to see you again. And we'll be right back.
It used to be okay in teachers' lounges. It used to be okay in maternity wards. It was okay in sporting arenas, college campuses, and office spaces. But now that we understand the deadly dangers of secondhand smoke, that's not okay anymore. So why is it okay that thousands of employees are exposed to it every day at work? Bottom line, it's not okay. Let's protect hardworking Oklahomans. Join the fight at stopswithme.com.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
I think for us, once we got started and we began to see the tremendous need just within our state, it really was just a calling for us. The blessings far outweigh any obstacles that we've faced.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Kent Meyers and Mick Cornett closing up this show with Dr. Jeremy Oller. Mick, what do you think about that, the economic outlook?
Well, it's obviously not good. And keep in mind, state government is overly reliant on the oil and gas industry. So our state government's going to be impacted more than our general economy. So that concerns me. Some website information for our viewers. You can get more about Jeremy Oller and his work at uco.edu. And we have a website, theverdict.tv. Tell us about a guest you'd like to see. Kent, thanks for another show. And we mentioned last week this was show number 1000. So this is 1001. Thank you all for joining us to be a part of it.
Yes, and counting. We appreciate your viewership very much. And we will look forward to seeing you next week with another good show.